It has been over several days since Apollo Management Fund took over Atletico Madrid as the majority stakeholders, and after so many days, it's kind of interesting to know about the trajectory and the track record of Apollo Management and what it really stores for the Atletico fans and for the club itself, and what kind of domino effects can this have on the Spanish football. Let's just talk about this. So, hello everybody, welcome back to another video after so long. It's been a pretty long sabbatical from my side, but here we are talking about one of the most historical days for an Atletico fan like me or several others out there. When this news came out that the ownership is going to change and like the name came out for Apollo, to be honest, initially without knowing anything, any context, I was really excited for some new owners. I thought like maybe it's like just like how much business minded the new like football has become now. I think it was just time that we also would go on to have some big money holding corporations as our owners. So here we are. Apollo Management is one of the largest alternative asset managers. Founded in 1990 by ex-Drexel bankers, over past 35 years, they have become known for buying distressed companies, executing massive deals like ADT's 6.9 nice billion acquisition and Yahoo's recently merging with insurance giant Athene, bringing their assets under management to nearly $900 billion. Apollo's portfolio spans entertainment, healthcare, retail, and technology for most part. However, public sentiments around portfolio company tells a revealing story. At LifePoint Health and Skion Health, which operates 220 hospitals across 36 states, employees and patients have criticized Apollo's ownership for aggressive cost cutting, understaffing, and service cuts that prioritizes profits over care quality. Meanwhile, grocery chain like Cardenas Markets and Tony's Fresh Markets workers have filed labor complaints alleging unfair treatment, retaliation, and anti-union campaigns, raising concerns about employees' welfare. Apollo's own reputation is similarly divided. They're widely respected for delivering strong investment returns and pioneering innovative deals, but have faced significant controversies, including founder Leon Black's ties to Jeffrey Epstein and ongoing criticism over labor practices in portfolio companies. Across retail, hospitality, and healthcare sector, there's growing skepticism about whether Apollo prioritizes short-term profits over long-term stabilities and worker well-being is still present. Today, in spite of all this, Apollo remains at the forefront of private equity, but the public sentiment is clear. Financial success doesn't automatically translate to positive stakeholder perception. So, touching a little bit on Atletico's history with ownership, Atletico in 1992, based on Spanish sports law, were forced to convert into Sports Public Limited Company. That is, they had to, get themselves the proper owners and anything, not be publicly owned. And on the last day, under President Jesus Gil, during that time, club met the formal agreements. And after that, Enrique Cerezo and Jesus Gil quietly seized control without paying a real money for the club, and which was later judged fraudulent by court, which is a pretty big controversy in itself. And since 2003, Enrique became club president, and Gil's son, Miguel Gil Marin, took over chief executive, cementing Gil Carrizo control over Atletico. And in 2015, Chinese conglomerate Panda Group brought stakes, which were around 70 to 20% of the club. But in 2017, Quantum Pacific Group acquired 15% stake. So things were diluting a bit, and Wanda sold their property to entirely to Quantum Pacific, making their share increase to 32%. And in 2021, Cerezo and Marine consolidated their stakes under the holding company of Atletico Holdco alongside the investors through the structure, and they held the majority club shares for that point of time. But now, the point which we are talking about is the major takeover by US management firm, which is Apollo, and this is a really big point in terms of the ownership, and it can really trickle down as a snowball effect of how things are currently in Spanish clubs for Spanish clubs in Spanish football. So based on all the research and everything which I've read around Apollo, and based on everything, we talk about direct and indirect sources and official news reports, I think it's pretty as clear as that Apollo, since being a management fund, from being born with the US ideology, one thing is the basic, which is generating profits. Yes, they are here to generate profit from Atletico. They are not here to just become and do what Roman Abramovich did with Chelsea, or maybe the UAE, like Arabs did with the Man City. They're here to generate profit. Thus, when again give an example of Chelsea, this ownership is more in line with what Todd Bowley did with Chelsea than compared to what you know Abramovich did to Chelsea. And also it's kind of similar to what FSG with Liverpool are doing. They took a really popular historical club which were on the verge of bankruptcy because of a pathetic ownership, and from there onwards they got it from less evaluation. Over the time, gradually, with the whole support and ecosystem of the club, they took the evaluation of the club 10 times more than what it was when they brought it, and it's currently a $5 billion club. So that's great. And similarly, talking about Atletico, in this case, Apollo has already gotten Atletico at a pretty high evaluation, that is 2.5 billion. So getting over it, I mean, it has to be as clear as day that based on the competitiveness and the position at which Atletico is in terms of Europe and as well as in Spanish football, the next step has to be they have to pull off something like, I mean, as an Atletico fan, it feels weird to say this thing, but you have to pull off things which Chelsea did when they were brought by Abramovich, or Man City did when they are currently doing. So this has to be like, if Apollo really have to impress in terms of being an ownership, they have to do that. That is by putting up more money. But as I said, they're not here to make us a champion. They're here to make us their profits. That is why. But they cannot make profits at the expense of trickling down the competitiveness and the stability which Simeone has given this club, because the evaluation at which they have brought the club is pretty staggering. Thus, they can, for the sake of profits, they cannot leave this club into shambles the way happened with Valencia with their current owner, Peter Lim. So Valencia is a different thing, and it really deserves a video on it in itself. It's a really big topic of how their history has been going on and their current struggle. So I'm gonna talk about that later. But currently, getting back to here. So again, as I said, Apollo is there for minting money. You can expect us signing a lot of prospect and big players, like prospect players and big hopeful players. More like we would get more into the scouting phase again, and this time we might be way more aggressive, like Chelsea. Based on everything, I only see us getting into that Chelsea route, because if we are able to, the position at which Atletico is, Apollo have to do the bare minimum. The things should be going as same as they were going under the previous ownership, and all they have to maintain is to buy aggressively young players, get them the tag of being at Atletico, play them few seasons, and sell them for around 10 to 15 million profits minimum. So that is how they can sustain for a decade or so. So this is something which you can expect from them, or maybe. And between them, if we get ourselves a competitive team and we get good results and everything, things go good way, then it can turn out to be like the way Liverpool has been in past past decade or so. So yeah, that is what I hope for, and it can happen. So let us see next what happens. Okay, so now let's just talk about the bigger picture and more important part of me making this video, which is talking about the Spanish football and the effect which this may have on the same. Because this is the time, like from the current scenario, like the biggest Spanish team, other than of course the big two, which is Atletico Madrid, other than Real Madrid and Barcelona, has been taken by a really big management firm from US, which is something which has been there like a norm for English clubs. So this really can trickle down into a different type of an effect if things go well with Apollo. Because I'm saying this like based on some reports which I've read and everything which is happening in Spanish football, we have to be clear. Spanish football is in shambles, other than Real Madrid and Barcelona, and of course Atletico Madrid to extent. There is no other team which has been competent enough to challenge for things in Europe, and of course to make this league way more interesting for international viewers. The views are going with the Premier League, the revenue is going with the Premier League, becoming sort of a super league in itself, and we are here living with these shambles. A lot of the financial fair play rules of like Spanish Football Federation has been really just hurting a lot of clubs. There are being cases of unregistered players for several clubs, that too in the top tier of one of the biggest leagues in the world, which isn't like shameful in itself. And And then there are legacy clubs who are just struggling with, in terms of stability. You talk about Valencia, and of course, you talk about Valencia and clubs which have just gone down and just disappeared, like Deportivo La Coruna. So it's really kind of not good scenes in terms of revenues and everything, stability in terms of Spanish football. And as I said, more and more people are watching other leagues, like Premier League being there, of course, being the first, and people are going away from Spanish league. Let me tell you one thing: if there are a random match going on between any two teams which people may not be able to remember the name or not being that fond of, they are more likely to watch a match of Premier League than they are to watch a match of La Liga. People don't care about any La Liga match other than if it's Real Madrid, Barcelona, and of course Atletico. People don't watch Spanish football much, and that I am saying, being one of the international viewers of La Liga, watching it from my home, from my country. I'm saying this thing. I've seen this myself, and this is the reality here. Okay, so after talking about the concerning aspects of La Liga, we gotta talk about some of the silver lining which we also read, which I may have also talked about. Is basically it is also considered among sleeping giants. There are definitely, as I said before, sleeping giants or clubs which are legacy clubs but aren't performing that well. You talk about Athletic Club Bilbao, with the kind of the instability which they have. They are stable in La Liga, but in terms of being competent enough to regularly go for European places, there is definitely some slack there. And of course, the struggle which Valencia has been doing in the past 2-3 seasons, being near the relegation zone, it's just concerning because of the huge legacy and all the history which they have. And of course, the clubs which have just vanished and we don't really not talk about much. And another case of Sevilla, a club which has won the most number of Europa Leagues, have just crashed down so badly. Their yearly wage bills have gone down 98% in past 3 seasons, which is just not concerning, it is just catastrophic. But talking about, as I said, the silver lining, a lot of the investors might be, of course, looking at this move because it, to be honest, for Spanish football is a really big thing which has happened with this ownership stake change in Atletico. And they consider a lot of La Liga clubs to be undervalued, and I also believe in this thing that a lot of the clubs in La Liga are being valued way in a way poor situation in terms of finances. Again, the more I talk about this topic, the more I go back to Valencia and their example, because the club is there at the valuation of 400 million in spite of being such in shambles, I think, and with having probably one of the worst owners in the whole 21st centuries for any sports club. Valencia is still there. It's pretty astonishing the fact that they're still here in the first division. It is how has to do also with all the the emotions and the club support which they have, and all the ex players in terms of the managing staff, and the, of course, their academy which is kind of saving them from places. But other than that, it's just really pretty black in terms of the future for Valencia in terms of competitiveness, if there isn't any change in terms of the regime which is being followed there. Thus, as I said, after Atletico in 2000s, those who have watched Spanish football would have considered Valencia a really great team. And if any of those owners would be looking forward to next teams to get themselves some hands on for some possible Spanish money, I think they'll be looking at Valencia. I think as much as this is an important step in for Atletico, this move can be a hopeful ray of hope for Valencia if things go well, as I said, as it can eventually do that snowball effect which is much needed for Spanish football in terms of finances. And with Javier Tebas not really helping much within his position, trying to be the main character based on all the things which he do rather than saving and improving Spanish football, I think it's really important to know how it happens. So